Well, welcome there, Sun Devils. Today we will be talking with James Crawley, who is a very accomplished business person, and he will share with us his words of wisdom. So, James, I just want to tell them real quick how we met each other. New York City, you were a very overworked iBanker.
That's right.
And we went and grabbed lunch, some cool place. And then unexpectedly, a couple years later, you show up in my backyard.
Yeah, we happened to move in the same neighborhood
Yeah,
that Eldar and his family live, and so it was a fun reconnection.
totally. Good to have you.
Thank you.
And now some accounting students are wondering how you came to be here and what you're doing. And so my first question that came from the accounting students was, how long were you in iBanking and what essentially made you move, other than the crazy schedule, or maybe that was it?
Yeah, of course. Would it be helpful for me to give a little bit more of a background of my career path
Please
first
do. Yeah.
at the outset? Okay. So, as you could probably tell from the video, I studied accounting as an undergrad, and I chose instead of going the Big Four accounting career path, I went into the finance track, and so I went and worked in investment banking in New York City for a couple of years. I then spent 2 years at a private equity fund buying and selling companies. I then went to business school, and out of business school, I did what's called a search fund. So I raised some money from some investors, bought a business, and I'm now running that. But happy to talk about any path, at any point on my path, particularly investment banking. And so,
Yeah, but tell me, with investment banking, why did you decide to go to business school? Why did you feel that you needed some extra learning?
yeah, so I had done 2 years of investment banking, 2 years of private equity, and I went to business school for a few reasons. If you work at a bigger private equity fund, it's almost expected that you go to business school in order to continue to move up at the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of my plan. I went to business school thinking that I would return back to really that same private equity fund. But I had also seen so many mentors and professionals that I looked up to, and a lot of them had an MBA. So a lot of it was I was just trying to reverse engineer their career. And I think in particular, what I was looking for is more development of some of the soft skills that you don't learn as much as an undergrad.
And you feel that in MBA program you got some of that, or?
I think so. I'm certainly not great still at some of these soft skills that I'm trying to be better at, but I think I am better at them post MBA. In particular, I think public speaking, negotiating, certain aspects of interpersonal skills are all different elements within a business context that I feel like I improved on in business school.
That's fantastic. I think like most of my students, they probably, and myself too, my a priori understanding would have been that in an MBA program, you primarily look for some awesome skills in finance or something advanced, but it sounds like it's really more about soft skills, perhaps networking. I don't know.
I think it really just depends on what your background is and what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my classmates were transitioning from non-business career paths previously, trying to transition into business. They'd come from the military,
Mm-hmm.
they'd come from the nonprofit sector, they'd come from government, and they were wanting to transition into business. A lot of my classmates were in one field. Maybe they had worked in energy or financial services, but they wanted to transition to technology or real estate or some different type of part of the economy. And so for a lot of my classmates, I think the main reason was to transition career paths. Mine wasn't. I wanted to continue on in the same career path. And so for me, the primary purpose was some of those soft skills that I'd wanted to develop.
That's actually very helpful. Another question that my students wonder about is, so you went to Harvard, one of the top. Harvard thinks they're the top, right? I mean, they're one of the best business schools. But what about state schools? Do you think your experience would have been different? And if so, how? Like, how would you advise students to deciding whether it's worth it to go to MBA program or not, whether it's state school or one of the best schools out there?
Yeah, I think it so much of it depends on where you're coming from, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you're coming from, completely outside the business world and you're wanting to just get your foot in the door, really any MBA program is probably going to be helpful. If you're an engineer wanting to transition to be a product manager, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
probably matters a little bit less where you go to school because you're just looking for some basic business acumen. Um, if if you're at a big three consulting firm and you're wanting to transition to a top tier private equity fund or a top 10 company, I think you probably need to go to a better business school. You probably need to go to a top 10 school.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say for 95% of people, going to a top 50 school, private or state school, can be a really good thing.
And ASU, by the way, is one of the top 50.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know they're a great school. We've got several employees in my company who graduated from ASU. No MBAs, but several who have an undergraduate business education, and they're phenomenal. I'd hire an ASU grad any day of the week.
You heard that. And how would you say that, would your answer differ if a person has already had, is already a CPA and has already had like some public accounting experience, say at the Big Four a couple of years? What should they?
I'd say probably you probably don't need to get an MBA at that point, unless you want to do something radically different than accounting.
Change careers, essentially.
Yeah. If a lot of former Big Four accountants either end up going to work for themselves in a consultancy role, or they'll go and be the CFO or controller of a small, mid-sized company. Or if you've been in at a Big Four firm for a long time, you can work for a big company. But I think that's a tried and true career path, is from Big Four into an accounting function at a company.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to go from Big Four to tech sales or marketing, and especially if you'd spent more than a couple of years at a Big Four firm, it's probably going to be difficult to transition on your own. Whereas
That's a good point.
an MBA is a good reset for someone in a business career path looking to do something different.
That's actually brilliant. And one of the things I wanted to ask you as well, you and I at lunch had a great conversation about the importance of accounting and how it stands compared to other majors.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share some of those thoughts with the students who will be watching? Essentially, we're talking about, what kind of skills are easier to learn post, after your formal education.
Yeah. So my background was I studied accounting as an undergrad, but I've never worked in accounting. I've only ever worked in finance or general management or investing. And I tell family members, friends who are trying to decide what they want to study, that studying accounting, if you want to work really in most areas of business, finance, general management, entrepreneurship, I think studying accounting can be the best thing that you can study, because accounting really is the language of business. And at some point, you'll get down the road in whatever career field you go in, assuming it's not accounting, and you'll need an accounting background, whether you're a general manager over a segment of a business, or you're starting your own business, and maybe you own your own business and you're applying for a loan. Understanding the accounting is so helpful. And I think accounting is really challenging to learn on your own. Finance, I don't think is that hard to learn on your own. I think there are other general manager skills that are easier learned outside the classroom, or you can get your MBA, as we've talked about. But learning the technical skill of the debits and the credits and understanding that framework of the accounting rules, for me, it was really beneficial to know early on in my career. And it continues to really benefit me, even in my role now where I'm running a company.
And I remember we talked at our another lunch where you actually used your skills to make some accounting skills to make some business decisions, like with lease.
Yeah, we were looking to move office spaces, and we were trying to decide between a few alternatives, and we found out that one of the office spaces had furniture that was going to come with the lease. And my accounting mind thought, okay, well, I could actually separate an operating lease from a capital lease here, and I could I can reduce the net impact to my P&L for the cost of the lease, because if we have a capital lease for the value of the furniture, that's going off into our balance sheet. And so the net effective cost to us is going to be less. And so as we were weighing different alternatives, that was a really important input. And actually, that was the space that we ended up going with. And it was at least in part accounting driven. So having that in the back of your mind, kind of always thinking about what the accounting impact is of certain decisions can make a big difference.
So study accounting, kids. James, so if we could switch now post MBA. So you graduated with an excellent MBA, and then it's a very high elite school, and you started doing what? Why?
So, yeah, my mom was very proud of me. A lot of people couldn't believe that I went from Harvard to working in the waste services space. So I traded an office on Park Avenue in Harvard for an opportunity to lead a company where we provide what's called valet trash services. So we contract with apartment complexes to take residents' trash from the doorstep to the dumpster 5 days a week. And initially, I didn't know that that's exactly the type of business that I wanted to get into. Mm-hmm. I decided to not go back into finance because I saw an alternative career path called doing what's called a search fund, where you raise money from investors, and with that capital, you go and acquire a business, and then you run it. You step in as the CEO. And so I had decided on that career path, and the business that I found that I was attracted to and wanted to buy happened to be this company, happened to be in the waste services space.
And it was during your MBA program when you decided to switch plans. Yep. You were going to go back to finance when you started the program.
Yep. Yeah, it was this doing a search fund was not on my radar at all. I didn't even know what the concept was when I started. But I took a class in school, learned about it, decided that that was for me and my family at the time, and ended up turning an offer down to go back to my old firm and pursuing this path.
That's beautiful. And that's, again, speaks to the value that it's hard to quantify in advance what kinds of things you will learn in the MBA program or any graduate program.
Absolutely. It's when you're on the treadmill or when you're in the rat race, especially early on in your career, and you're just trying to meet deadlines and trying to keep up with, the demands of a early and busy career, it can be hard to really take a step back and think, is what I'm doing now really what I want to be doing? Is this helping me to be happy now? And am I going to be happy in 5 years doing this? But getting an MBA, excuse me, is a really good opportunity to just step back and let the dust of life settle, and then to really be strategic about what you want to do, and also to have your eyes opened to other opportunities. Obviously, this was, or as I said, this was something that was new to me that I ended up pursuing. But there could have been a lot of other things. There were a lot of other opportunities that I didn't know existed before school, and my eyes were open. And I think that's true of most MBA programs.
That is really cool. James, the other question I wanted to ask you is, so after the MBA program, you started the business. It clearly was something very different than what you were doing before. Did you feel that there were some skills that no program could really teach you that you had to learn as you were doing it?
Yeah. I think as a small business owner, there are certain things where you can't really learn it from a classroom. You just have to be there. I mean, terminating the first employee that I let go, it was really hard. It was really, really challenging, and no classroom is going to prepare you for that. And then I know I mentioned I went to business school to improve in certain soft skills, which I do feel like I made a lot of progress in. But there are a lot of other soft skills that are tough. How to coach an employee, how to develop a strong culture within an organization, how to really inspire and to motivate. I can't say that I'm great at those things, but those are things that you have to really, in my view, learn on the job. And then just at the end of the day, a lot of the most successful people are just the hardest workers. And so you either have that work ethic or you don't. You're not going to get that from a classroom. And so in our business, one of our key core values is grit. And just at the end of the day, getting the job done with the limited resources that you have is I think in any career field or career path, industry or field, that's an incredibly important value. So I think work ethic, um, and then some of these other softer interpersonal skills are things that are harder to learn in the classroom. Even though you might be able to make some progress on them in an MBA program, those that I mentioned are a little bit harder.
That is interesting that you mentioned work ethic. That's actually one of the questions that students were wondering. How is your life balance now compared to iBanking? Was this change, did it affect it?
I work far fewer hours, but at times my stress level is comparable.
Hmm.
When I was working in investment banking, um, I was working at least 80 hours a week, often more than 100 hours a week. So it was, in the office at 9 a.m. and I was often there until 2 or 3 or even 4 a.m. And
Yeah.
that was 5 or 6 days a week. So it was a lot. It was a phenomenal training
Hmm.
experience. I'd recommend that anyone spend 2 years in an investment bank, because I probably got 4+ years of business education just simply because of the number of hours I was working.
We're trying to convince them to go into public accounting for similar experience.
Yeah, I think it's right now as a student, you don't know what you don't know. And I had an entrepreneurship professor when I was in college, and it was an entrepreneurship class. It was people who wanted to go start their own business, and he tried to convince all of us from not doing that initially because there's so much out there about the business world that you really need to know about how to interact with clients, how individuals in an organization communicate. And if you can go and learn on someone else's dime, make mistakes on someone else's payroll for 5 to 7+ years, and I'm certainly biased because that's what I did.
Hmm.
I think that usually makes a lot of sense.
So that's actually almost like a continuation of your education.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you said that professor tried to convince you not to do it?
Yes. Yes.
And I guess there are those lucky individuals out there who don't need that experience and things just work out for them. But it sounds like what you're saying is if you have that experience, like iBanking or public accounting or some of those professional services firms that essentially on their dime you get to learn, it sounds like you increase your education level and perhaps learn about more opportunities and know how to capitalize on them.
And I think especially if you can get into a client services role,
Hmm.
so whether that's banking, consulting, or public accounting, you have an opportunity to work on a bunch of different types of companies quite often. And a lot of times they can be in different industries. So right now you can only imagine, what would it be like to work for a technology company or a financial services company or an energy company. But if you can do a project for them, that's a great way to get a window into that company and
Mm.
into that industry. So I think public accounting can be a great place to start a career, if not for that reason, to just continue your education and you have your eyes open to more opportunities.
That's fantastic, James. And everything you said is going to be awesome. I'm going to be watching it myself so I can tell students in future classes, and they will be watching this video. Any last words of wisdom or warning or don't do this, do this?
I think the only thing that I would say, just as a point of general advice, is do the right thing and realize do the right thing and work hard because life is long and the world is a very small place. And I think you'll be surprised at um, if you do a good job in one career path with one boss, that can often unlock other doors. And
Mm.
if you don't, if you mess up, that can often come back to bite you. And so just remember to always try to do the right thing, have integrity, work hard, and it will pay dividends because your career is a really long time.
That's a great advice. And just so people understand the perspective, when I was introducing you at the beginning, I should have mentioned where you are at now. So your company now has. Could you tell us a little bit about the size and scale of it that you were able to grow into?
Yeah. So when the investors that backed me and when we bought into the business, we had about 30 full-time employees, or sorry, 6 full-time employees and roughly 30 part-time employees. Today we have roughly 120 full-time employees and 700 part-time employees.
And this is about 2 years after.
About 3 years.
About 3 years.
Yeah. So over the last 3 years, we've done 8 acquisitions to add on to the business. We've grown a lot organically. We've expanded into another 25 states from where we were when we initially started, and we've added a couple different service lines. So it's
Fantastic.
been a really fun ride, and hoping for more.
You glad you did it?
Yeah, it's the first 18 months in stepping into a business that was running with problems that were no one's fault. It was just a small business that was growing quickly. Dealing with all of those initially and dealing with the stress and waiting until we were at the size where we could put in a real team, it was really stressful. So the first 18 months was more challenging. I'd say the last 18 months I've had the most fun of my career because I'm now able to spend most of my time working on the business versus in the business. So I spend most of my time focused on developing culture and strategy, getting the right people in the right seats, making sure that we have the right systems and processes. And I love that. I love seeing the impact of my work on that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, James. That was really enlightening, and I know many students, hopefully, even years ahead, will be watching this, and we'll be grateful to you for this. And thanks for watching us, everybody, and good luck in your business pursuits.
Thank you.
Go Devils.
Great to be with you.